My guest today is Tim Tully. He's a complex claims analyst at AIG. This is Caleb Owens with the Insurance Experience.
Hey, Caleb, thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim. I really enjoy talking with you. I think we're going to have a lot of fun today. You're a very interesting person to talk to, just being completely honest. Why don't we just tell me more about yourself?
Let's see. I'm living in New Jersey these days. I'm originally from New Orleans. I served as a Marine for 4 years, did some crazy fun stuff there, got out, went into the normal New Orleans bar restaurant scene. And after about 7, 8, no, probably closer to 10 or 12 years, I had a cousin who was a catastrophe adjuster following Hurricane Katrina. And we were hanging out on some holiday. And he says, "Tell me about what you do." And I said, "I basically just put out fires." And he says, "Yeah, that's what I do too. It's one thing after another." He said, "You should really try this and get into it." So I said, "Okay." So next time there's a storm, let's see what my schedule looks like. So in 2017, I want to say it was Hurricane Michael hit Florida. And he said, "Hey, gear up. Let's go." I said, "All right." So I told my bosses, I'll be back whenever I'm back. At the time, I was just doing mostly a bunch of helping out here and there. They're opening up different restaurants, so I'd come in more of a consultant. So they really didn't need me for a schedule. So I went out in the storms and learned how to actually use a ladder safely, I guess you'd say. And I was picking up shingles and testing everything out and really learning as I went. I did that for a few years. Ended up getting married to my amazing wife, and she lives in New Jersey, hence me up here in the freezing cold. And she said, "Look, this is great. I love that you're in insurance and everything, but being a cat adjuster, you're on the road. You don't know how long. You could be out there for a month. You could be out there for 9 months." So she said, "I know it's a great job and you can keep it or you can keep me." And I said, "All right, let's go with option B." So I had to move into more of an office role. I ended up getting on with a National Fire and Marine, also called Kima Capital. They're a Berkshire Hathaway company. And I ended up being the manager of all of the commercial claims for the entire U.S., anywhere from 700 to 900 claims at a time. So baptism by fire. I did that for a few years. And then I ended up getting the offer for where I am now. And it's a much bigger company. And I said, okay, I think maybe it's time to take the next step. And obviously I'm working more on the liability side right now, completely different. That's how I am. That's how I started doing what I'm doing today.
Wow. You ran through a lot of history really quickly.
Yeah, that's the Reader's Digest version there.
Yeah, no kidding. That's really interesting. You just make it sound so easy. Was it, in grand scheme of it, you went from working in bars and restaurants, and then you just transitioned right over into the insurance? Obviously, you got all your license and everything like that, correct?
So I went in. There was a company called Worley. They're out of Hammond, Louisiana. Now they're called Alacrity.
Okay.
And that's one of the things they specialize in, is just sending out independent adjusters. So a lot of times they'll send them out. When my first deployment was with State Farm, and again, a baptism by fire. And I've enjoyed it ever since. I really have. I haven't looked back one day since I've been in the insurance business, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been definitely a learning experience, and I love where I am. I love the path, and I'm always curious to see what I'm going to learn next, where I'm going to be next, and what the next step is.
Wow, you make it sound so easy, and I'm sure there's a lot of work involved all along the way. So that's how you got started in the insurance business. You just got started trial by fire, like you're saying, and then you've worked your way, progressed from one position up to where you're at now with AIG.
Yeah.
Wow.
When I first came years ago, like I said, I was on roofs.
Right.
You're going out there for months at a time to Ohio or wildfires in California, and where am I staying? So that's on you, buddy. Okay, fine. So there's a lot of parts to it. Like you said, I might make it sound a little easier than it is. There's a lot of trials and tribulations to it. If it's worth doing, stick it out when it's hard, and it'll get easier and it'll get better. And here I am.
Wow. Okay. That sounds really cool. So tell me about some case like ones you're just alluding to here that you've been working on recently. I'm more focused on what your aspect in this, not trying to get into the attorney's aspect. What you do is you're actually doing research on these claims, because these seem like a lot more obviously a lot more complex than just a regular residential claim where you've got a fire or car accidents, all these different kinds of insurance that we're used to. These are are so much more complex than that. And so you work a lot with attorneys to
I
try to
do.
go.
Obviously, when you're dealing with numbers that get into the billions, no matter what company you're working with, some higher ups are going to need to know, hey, this is on the docket. This is coming up. This is definitely something that we need to be aware of.
Right.
And again, this is a change for me jumping into the new field because, from CAD adjuster to going out there and as an independent adjuster to working commercial claims. And the commercial claims I was working were quite large. We had a few for $100 million. You're talking a bunch of, it could be anything from hotels to condos and apartments or businesses that were just out and doing whatever. So the numbers are going to be big and you figure out what it is. It's not too much different from homeowners, really. We know, is there a trigger? Is there coverage?
Right.
Okay, great. Let's do some research. Let's send out some adjusters. Let them look into it. Do we agree with what they're saying? Are we expecting these numbers to change at all? If so, why? Have your numbers, be ready and willing to report up the chain of command. And that's what it is. It's just with this one, obviously, it's a little different because it's such a niche field. But I like that.
Yeah, I could definitely understand why. So tell me more
Yeah.
about your commercial claim experience. Whenever you worked those claims, tell me about some kind of really interesting claim. Sounds like you've done that for longer. You did the cat adjusting and also you did some commercial claims. Tell me about some of those interesting claims that you did then.
Let's see. You remember the Texas freeze that happened not too long ago?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. That was an issue where it was basically a mud map of everyone who was insuring. Where I am right now, it's this company is from 1 million to 4 million. And then the next company is 4 million to 12 million, whatever it is. Commercial was more of a mud map where, okay, all of us are pulled in together. You've got 10%, you've got 5%, you've got 40%. So it was different in that field, but a big difference from it was we would have to have basically roundtable meetings and say, we all need to agree on this. So the Texas freeze comes around and we've got people saying, okay, the window for the data loss, we're going to say is 3 days. Okay, fine. They're saying the Texas freeze happened on a Friday. I'm just making something up. And then Tuesday, this place is flooded. So what do we do? Is this two separate occurrences? I was like, what do you mean is this two separate? No, it's not two separate occurrences. It's the data loss, not the data discovery. What are you talking about? Okay, then if that's the case, it's going to cost a lot more. And it's this and this. But it's a commercial claim. You're going to have loss of business. You're going to have everything. You're going to have, you deal with a lot of ALE kind of thing.
Yep.
So it's all involved. You're going to have property damage. You're going to have coverage A is destroyed. You're going to have coverage B coming all over the place. The fees coming out of these, and again, the loss of business, the loss of rent that's going to come from a lot of these places that are just no longer available. Okay, let's get into it. And that's just one thing that'll happen. And you're already swarmed with it. You know how it goes. You've got 1,000 claims at one time that you're in charge of. And then a Texas storm comes. What do you mean a freeze in Texas? What do you mean we have 90 more claims that I'm in charge of? Okay. We used to say in the Marines, how do you need an elephant? One bite at a time. Let's go. Yeah. So you move on to the next one. We had the same thing with the summer protests not too long ago following the George Floyd protest, whatever it was. Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Commercial damage. You're talking about storefronts that were broken and stores that were looted and stores that couldn't open up. You can't open up. You've got a police presence saying, no, we're shutting everything down. And then you also had people who were going, you know what? I'm going to board up my business because I don't know what's going to happen here. I saw in the news that in Milwaukee last night, there was a couple $100 million worth of damage. And I have a storefront that is, if I'm in New York City and you think this might happen, there's a very good chance this might happen. I'm boarding up and I'm waiting until this whole thing's over with. Was that a covered loss? The police weren't there. That's not something that we're not covering. Hey, I was worried about if this happened. I went ahead and shut down. Again, you got a claim. You got a first notice of loss. Now you have to get in.
So would that be covered? Let's say that whenever they did that, whenever they had those protests and some of those cities, they went in there to a business and they were smashing windows, stealing merchandise, different things like that. Some of that had to be covered, I would presume.
Of course, 100%. You got to figure people are setting structure fires.
Right.
That's part of insurance. It's a shared loss. That's what this whole thing is. Yeah, could you come through and start saying, I could find a reason, I could find an exclusion that would say, technically, this term right here in this policy says that if it's for political purposes, then it could be considered something.
Right.
Not covered. No. We're not talking about something that's an international event here. We're talking about, hey, this happened. Let's get people back to where they're supposed to be.
Right. So that's what you actually worked during those claims, doing commercial. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because there's so much of us that I don't want to say we completely forgot about it. I remember all those, and whenever they were going in there to those businesses and doing all that damage. But it's really interesting from an insurance side is that was a coverable claim. So they had to go in there and detail the damages out and file a claim on that.
And it's covered from where I was at the time. I'm, again, can't speak on policy language for different insurers or the insureds or what they signed or anything else. But anything that happened between January of 2000 and January of 2002 for any commercial claims, if it went through my business, I was the one handling that claim. I handled every claim for the entire United States for that. I started off in catastrophes, knowing that this was going to be a big deal and catastrophe modeling and what we have to expect. Yeah, we know there's a hurricane coming. Let's look into it. That's a big thing, especially when any insured, whether it's homeowners insurance or whether it's business insurance or anything else, we've got a hurricane coming and it's a category 4 and it's headed straight for a serious metropolis. How many insureds do we have there? How much, worst case scenario, what are we going to be on the hook for here? Best case scenario, what's going to happen here? Another big deal that we had was, 2-3 weeks after I started working there, we had this small event, COVID. That's what it was called. It was
COVID.
But nobody knew what was going on. Not only did we not know, can we work from home or can computer systems handle everyone working from home? But the insurance industry also had to go, we need to look really close at these policies because what happens if this thing lasts more than a month? Are we going to cover everything? Are we going to cover all loss of business?
So what were they covering in regards to COVID? Was that, but nothing. I didn't think so. That you would have to have a really, because that would be, it could be construed as a loss of business, but that would be really hard to cover anything like that, especially if that was not into the policy written into there. And how would you?
It comes down to underwriting. It comes down to your exclusions.
Right.
I was talking with one of the guys one time, one of the other adjusters for another company, and we're talking about it. And we're saying the same thing you're saying. Is this coverable? Is this? And the guy looked at me and he says, he's done all this research on it, and COVID is on the counter. How long is it going to last? Is it going to be there forever?
Right.
Is it going to be there forever? No, it's going to be there for 3 days. Right, for 72 hours, and then it's no longer infectious, right? So the guy told me, I've never seen property damage that fixes itself. And I said, whoa, that just really told me a lot. I said, that makes perfect sense. And he goes, yeah, that's crazy. I just thought of that. I said, you should tell your bosses that because they're going to be real happy with it. It was, and look, I don't want to say nothing got covered with COVID.
Right.
Different policies, different this. Some companies were reimbursed for all cleaning costs.
Wow.
Everything.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the Holiday Inns throughout the country, and I'm using that example, I'm not saying they're one that was covered.
Right.
Now we have to pay for all the cleaning supplies. We need to pay for all the man hours. We need to cover the mop level 4 gear that they're going to be wearing up and down and the spaces that they need to keep and everything else.
Wow.
But it's something that no one had thought of.
Very true.
And now here we are right in the middle of it. So obviously going forward, you're going to have all kinds of exclusions going, if anything like this is in there, if anything like COVID comes out, it's not covered. But then we had fights on different parts of it because some people had actually put in a SARS exclusion just because of what had happened. Yeah.
Wow.
Remember SARS?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Guess what? COVID is a form of SARS.
Okay, so they would have
So,
a SARS exclusion saying they would not cover anything within that realm. And just like you're saying, COVID is a form of SARS.
but then you have people arguing, going, no, this isn't. I'm not considering it that. The medical field is, and the CDC is, and I know that you're a real trustworthy guy and all there, fella, but I have to follow some strict guidelines. One or two of them had a SARS exclusion or a SARS-like event. Well, this isn't like SARS. This is SARS. It's just a more not concentrated, but a more infectious and
Right.
now the whole country. But it's SARS. It's a type of SARS. And
Yeah.
again, just like anybody else in the insurance field, I'm not a doctor either. But you talk to them, you bring in experts. You're dealing with an elevator. I don't know how an elevator works. Couldn't tell you. I know there's pulleys and stuff, but I don't know how much it would cost to fix it. So
Right.
you bring in an elevator expert. You call Mr. Rotis. Hey, I need some information here. And sometimes that information is worth paying for. In the case for COVID, that information was there for us. We didn't have to call in Fauci. He was busy. This is SARS. This is a contagious virus. So now let's look at these exclusions. Is this involved? Is this here? Is this there? And we had some people that were actually calling for loss of attraction. And I said, a loss of attraction? How do you figure that?
Yeah.
That's something where you're talking about if you're a hotel in Paris, the Eiffel Tower is 2 blocks from you. Yeah, that's going to bring some business. Eiffel Tower falls, that's loss of attraction. People, we're not going to have as many people here now. But people were pulling anything that they could. Hey, here's a reason why you should cover it. Here's this. And doing your job, you have to look into it and go, okay, let me look into that. I'm not going to blow it off. Let's see if you have a valid point there. Because if you're entitled to this, 100%. You can't go into it saying, I'm going to find a reason to shut this whole thing down because we're not covering COVID. No, loss of attraction. Okay, we'll look into it. No problem at all. Give me your facts and whatever information you have, and I'm going to run it through some people. And if you're right, you're right. Most cases didn't work out that way, but COVID was also something where if everyone covered everything from COVID, the entire insurance industry would have been complete.
Exactly. There's no way they could cover it all.
There's not enough money in the world.
True.
Where are you getting this from?
Yeah.
Couldn't do it.
I remember that back whenever it was first starting, we were talking a lot about it being on the countertops. There's so many people freaking out about that because we didn't know. You got to give us kind of credit. Like we didn't know. Nobody did. What was?
Nobody knew anything.
Yeah, exactly. How it was spread and then how long it would stay, like you're saying, on a countertop. I think businesses were really worrying about if I have a customer comes in here inside the restaurant, am I going to get sued because of that?
Claims.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a lot of that learning curve. Now that just seems funny because when we look back on it, like I think we know so much more about how it spreads, what to do. And there was a lot of things that were overdone, but at the time we didn't know. We had no idea how bad this was going to be, how deadly it was going to be.
Was the only option though.
Yeah.
Overkill had to be. Otherwise, we still have it. Look, I had COVID 3 weeks ago, and my wife got real mad because the day after she came down with it too. But now I had it for 3 days. I didn't work for one of them, and the rest of the time I pulled up claims and I said, okay, coughing a little bit, a little tired, but you still work through it. People got their vaccines. We're moving on from it. But like you said, people know so much more. I remember when it was first getting started, 2-3 days before it was all shut down, I was on the bus from New Jersey into Manhattan, and there was a guy in the seats over to my side, and he had the mask over his eyes like it was a sleep mask, and he was passed out. And I said, I don't think that's how this is supposed to go, but this whole thing's new to me. But yeah, but nobody knew what was going on. And this guy, his wife or his kids or whoever, you have to wear this mask. And he said, no problem. It's real early in the morning. I'm going to use this mask. But then again, 2 days later, that was shut down. And everything was shut down. We've seen it. I just finished my master's degree in Homeland Security. And part of that is for disaster relief, recovery, and response. And the other part is for terrorism. So you always talk about biological attacks. And you say, what could happen here? What would happen here? And that was part of me coming on with the commercial industry, just because they said, okay, these are always different aspects that could come into play. Let's see what this guy has to say about it. Let's talk about it a little bit. What are some different scenarios? So with that, we were also the ones going, look, they're talking about shutting down the entire city of New York in about 3 or 4 days. Why don't we do it now? Why don't we do it now? Why don't we do a practice run where everybody's got their computer? Let's see if this Zoom thing is going to actually work or not.
Wow.
Then let's see what happens. And some people said, no, I'm still going to come in. Okay. Not me. I want to see where it's going to go. I'm going to watch this from the house.
Right.
And that's how that went. But it was a different trip, and we all know it. We all lived through it, and we're still living through it now, of course, a much lesser degree. And as far as I know, there's no COVID claims that are still coming in for commercial. But yeah, to get back to your question that you asked me 4 days ago, I think the onset of COVID was probably the strangest claims that came in when I was working those commercial claims.
I can
Everything
only
else
imagine.
is expected. Yeah, there's a hurricane coming. You know,
Right.
there's a possibility of tornadoes. Yeah, they happen all the time. Kansas might be having one right now. We don't know.
Right.
But there's all these things. Nobody saw it coming. And everyone in the insurance industry tightened up real quick. And they said, let's do our due diligence before this strikes, because we know every insured that we have is going to put in claims. And they did. They did. Everyone did. Because why wouldn't you?
Wow.
I would. Yeah.
So they were all trying to file claims, just trying to get anything they could.
Yeah, but a lot of them were saying, we're going to lose $18 million a month on this one location. That's loss of business. Do you need me to give you my address? Are you going to sell it to me or what? No, but I hear you, and we're going to look into it.
Right.
But that was also something where every other claim was still on the table, even before COVID. You had structure fires. You had tornado events that have been going on for years. So all those claims are still on the table. And then you had COVID. Now, that also slowed down the intake of a lot of claims because people were staying home. Nobody's going out. Nobody's in the buildings that could be having this or doing this or whatever.
Right.
But it didn't mean we were less busy, because we're trying to figure out what this COVID thing is. And we're trying to figure out how we're going to deal with it. And like anytime there's a new type of claim, the attorneys are going to do pretty well, because that's who we're going to talk to. Hey, we need you to look over this with a fine-tooth comb. And we have underwriters, but nobody expected this, like we said.
Wow. That was a really unusual event for everybody, I think. So many different ways.
It's the defining event, I think, of this generation. How could it not be?
Totally agree. Yeah. After that, myself, I tend to view future events and dates with a little bit of skepticism. It's, you know what, we're planning this in about a year or 6 months, but you know what? I don't know what's going to happen, because I'm expecting another shoe to drop or a curveball with this whole invasion with Ukraine. Never expected that either. It was a stunner when it actually happened. Same thing with COVID. So then you're like, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen next. Aliens.
Yeah, and guess what? With both of them, this thing will be over in a month.
Right. Yeah, 2 years later.
Right, still going.
That's crazy. That should be really interesting with your Homeland Security degree. That should be really helpful, I would think.
In the commercial side, it was. Obviously, what I'm doing right now doesn't have too much to do with it. But like I said, I like the idea of working niche markets. There's so many different kinds of coverage out there.
Where are you going to go after all this? With where you're currently at with your current employer, where do you want to move towards after this?
I didn't know that I was going to be here. I didn't have a clue. I'm real curious about that myself. I literally just finished that master's degree. Let's see, it's January now. It's the very end of January. I finished it in the middle of December. So it took a while, little pieces here, little pieces there, but finally got it. I'm real curious. I'd like to stay in some kind of a niche market. I think the field that I'm in right now, people don't stay in for too long, as you can imagine. You really can't read these claims your entire career. Maybe some people can. Maybe they can.
Right.
But I like the idea of the active shooter terrorism type of adjuster. I like seeing where that is. I've dealt with that since I was in the Marines. It was a big thing. So staying with that, or I'm also good going back to the property side. Anything with a property casualty, any kind of disaster relief, recovery, response, or even planning. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but I'm real interested and I'm real excited to see where it's going to go from here.
That's excellent. Okay, Tim, it was great talking with you. I learned a lot of
Absolutely.
information. Honestly, it was a lot of fun.
I appreciate your time, Caleb. This is fantastic. And thank you so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it. You ever need anything, you have my number. Call me directly anytime.
Will do. Thanks.
All right.